Hello everyone, Keith Burns with Green Cover Seed here at the Central Platte NRD corn interseeding demonstration plot. We're going to just take some time and do a little bit of a video tour here. Along with me is Dean Kroll with Central Platte NRD and UNL, and also Noah Syme with Syme Ag and Syme Farming Families, and it's their farm. They did a lot of the work here. So Noah, why don't you go ahead and just start by sharing a little bit of the history and the background of you guys' experience with interseeding into corn.
Okay. Well, we started 5 years ago with trying to use a herd seeder and broadcast spread in corn at V6 to V8 stage. We tried that for 2 years, had very hit and miss success. Then we tried a year of using modified insecticide boxes, trying to control our rate and incorporate it with rotary hose. And then 2 years ago, Dad purchased a Henniker interseeder set up on 8-inch centers down in the furrow to allow us to control our rate more accurately and also our depth.
Okay, and we're going to get some video and look at that interseeder a little bit closer here a little later on. So Dean, why don't you share a little bit of the background about how this project came together and kind of how it's funded and your role in this.
Okay, basically I'm in charge of a demonstration project in Central Platte Natural Resources District. Basically how this whole thing really started in 2010 was there's a lot of seed corn raised in this area, and what I wanted to do is utilize nitrate uptake by cover crops. So that was all successful. I have data that shows that does happen. But the big thing that many producers have said over the years is we need that cover crop out there longer. We need to utilize that longer instead of waiting until after harvest or things like that. So that's what got me interested in interseeding at V4, V5, V6. That's kind of a touchy weather issue there as far as when you really get that done, but we've had some good success and some bombs, I mean, throughout the years. So with talking to other people that are interested in this, we really didn't know what would be successful in a shady environment. So that's why this plot here today has 9 different cocktail mixes in it. So we're evaluating what works in a shady environment versus one that doesn't. So this is basically an evaluation plot.
Yep, Dean hit it right on the head. The number one limiting factor in trying to get a cover crop to grow in commercial corn like this, number one, is lack of sunlight. And so by going at V4, the goal is to get that cover crop established before you have full canopy closure on the corn. And then once that canopy closes, that cover crop kind of slows down. Isn't really competitive with the corn, because by the time corn's at V4 to V6, it's not going to be bothered by that tiny little cover crop growing. And you'll see that as we walk through here. There's no threat of competition to the corn here. The bigger thing is some things just aren't going to grow very well in the shade, and we will see that here as well. There's a lot of variability. We see this all the time. We'll see the same mix look pretty good in one row, and in another row you don't hardly see it. So we don't have all the answers to that, but certainly we're learning things every year. Another one of the hurdles, in addition to lack of sunlight in doing this, is herbicides. So Noah, you want to talk just a little bit about what your herbicide program was on this field?
You're gonna have to do some editing here. I don't have.
Okay, we can do that if we
yeah,
see
we're gonna have to look at. Yeah, we're gonna have to talk about that because I'm gonna have to look it up.
Okay. But I know
to tell you exactly what we did.
That's gonna be a question people will ask.
I know, and I should have been thinking about that. We came in right behind the planter with a pre-emerge and put a pre-emerge down. But I'm gonna have to look up exactly what we used.
Okay.
We didn't use anything that was, we were very selective with what we used.
Yeah, but I think we want to have a section in there about that, because that for sure will be one of the first things that people ask.
Right. And to go back, when we're talking about heat and temperature, this is the first year that I put some heat sensors in the corn rows where we measure, and we will be able to graph out what the temperature and the sunlight, solar energy at ground level was for the whole season. So I'll have that information this year also. This is the first year that we've done that, but Keith and I talked prior to this that would be good to know, and I totally agree.
So just to be clear on that, that's not just measuring temperature, but it's measuring light coming through the canopy.
Right. And
so we get an indication of how much or how little light is actually penetrating.
And basically they're about 3-4 inches off the surface of the soil. So
yeah. So we'll have that data at a later time. We're also going to be so right now we are the end of August. And this corn is probably, what do you think, a month away from harvest, probably. Right. So we're going to be looking at what we see now. They are going to be installing a GoPro camera on the combine, so we'll have some video as the combine moves through the field, and then we likely will come out and do another video evaluation of what we're seeing after the combine is rolled.
Right, and time-wise, it was interseeded June 26th, so it hasn't really been hasn't been planted that long here, but it's quite a while.
And you were more like V7, 8?
We were definitely V7, V8.
Okay.
I think that's something we're still working on is basically a comfort factor of getting something in the ground.
Yeah.
I think we're really seeing we've got to be in here at V4.
And some of the timing had to do with weather and herbicide applications and all that.
We've had a lot of rain this spring that also prevented.
The target was V4.
A lot of variables that go into that though. So okay, I think let's just start walking through the plots.
Okay. In this first treatment, we have planted here 4 pounds of red clover, 6 pounds of Elbon rye, and 6 pounds of annual ryegrass. And what we have seen from last year is, even at these low rates, this treatment was pretty successful. Not necessarily in our plot last year, but on the other acres that Symes had planted adjacent to where our plot was last year. So
really looked pretty impressive.
It really was impressive at those low rates. So we decided to add that to this year's plot, and right now, whether it's because it's on the edge or what, it looks pretty impressive this year also.
And one of the things that looked impressive, and we were out there the next spring, so we were looking at what had overwintered. The red clover was by far the most successful overwintering legume that we had, and the cereal rye did quite well too. So Jake, can come on in here and get a little closer look. There is some other grasses here that I think are just field grasses, but you can kind of see we've got a good representation of clover. Some are bigger than others, but there is a decent smattering of clovers about. And then it's a little hard to tell probably on the video which ones are the ryegrass. The ryegrass are going to have the narrower blades, and they're kind of a shiny, waxy leaf. But this ryegrass has established itself pretty well right in this particular area. I would say it's probably doing better than the cereal rye right here.
I would agree.
Now we may see in different parts of the field, we may see that differing. But even in the other rows that we looked at, the clover, it tends to be a little smaller, but it's there. And what we saw with that red clover is it was not very big even until all the way up through harvest, but it kind of hung in there. Then after harvest, it caught some sunlight and really took off and grew. Part of what will be interesting is where we mowed down on this headland here. When we come back a month from now at harvest, it'll be interesting to see what this stuff has done just with 30 days of sunlight as compared to what's still growing.
Right, and the sunlight to the ground's going to get a lot.
Yeah,
we're going to get a lot more within the next 3 weeks.
It's going to start breaking down.
It's going to the greenness and all the senescence is going to set in and stuff like that. So there's going to be more sunlight to the ground and to our cover crop.
Yep. Okay, should we move to the next one?
Yep. This, I guess to explain where we went with this year, at our field day that we had in March on last year's plot, there was a lot of livestock people there. So when we set this up this year, we kind of set it up with a theme towards those livestock producers. So as you can see, and as we go, you'll be able to see that our mixes are named kind of towards that livestock industry. This one here is a cool season diversity. 2 pounds of alfalfa, 2 pounds of red clover, 2 pounds of hairy vetch, 6 pounds of Elbon rye, 4 pounds of annual ryegrass, 2 pounds of rapeseed, and 2 pounds of flax. So a lot more diverse mix than the first one.
And I don't know what the reason is, but this one shows really poorly right now. There's not a lot of stuff out here. Again, we'll be able, after harvest, we can look at other rows and other locations. Just not a lot. But if you look over here, there is some rapeseed coming. There is some clover. There is some hairy vetch. But I would say, by and large, this has not done well.
No.
And part of that could be, it's all cool season things, so they may not have taken off in June quite as fast or quite as well. But I would expect these to be doing better than this, and hopefully we'll see better representation in other parts of the field. But right now, there's not a lot to see on this particular one right in this area anyway. Really not even a lot.
Not even out here in the open there's not much. All right, our next treatment, you want to get a shot of that first? Warm diversity number 1, 3 pounds of alfalfa, 5 pounds of red ripper cowpeas. We have some, what are those, Group 7 soybeans?
Group 7 soybeans, yeah.
Group 7 soybeans. We have nitro radish. We have some annual ryegrass in this also, some buckwheat, and some flax.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So this one looks really good. Jay can come over here, zoom in, and I want to give people the secret of how to really make interseeds work into corn. Can you zoom right in there? So if you really want to have good interseeding in corn, what you need to do is you need to run over about half your corn here. Like
you need to have a little sprayer blight in the field.
Have a little sprayer blight, but that's just that proves the point that the limiting factor in this is sunlight, because where this partial row of corn was run over, we have a tremendous amount of cover crop growth in the time period it's given. And all the species, the radishes, the cowpeas, the buckwheat is in there blooming. Looks fantastic. So we know that it's a sunlight issue, and you'll see this same type of thing like in the pivot tracks, anywhere where you had planter skips and stuff like that. So I wanted to show you that just to show you that it is a sunlight deal. But if we come over here where there's maybe not quite as much of the corn run over, we still have some decent representation. The radishes have done quite well here. We do have some buckwheat blooming, even though it's very short. Look at this buckwheat plant. There's only about 4 inches tall, but it's starting to shoot out a blossom there. So it's growing and it's hanging in there. It's doing the best that it can in the limited sunlight that it has to work with. So I would say this one is fairly impressive. We've got some cowpeas down in there that are doing quite well. Cowpeas will grow very quickly in that June time frame when they're planted, and then they just try to hang on with the sunlight that they're given. But the warm season plants kind of have an advantage early on. Right. The cool season plants tend to not have to grow as aggressively, tend to go a little more dormant through the heat of the summer, so they don't, sometimes they hang on better too. So and maybe in 2 months it could be the exact opposite. It could very well be, but even out here where it was mowed down, you can see there's some nice cowpeas, that were growing within the row here. And we've had some other people, Chris Teach out in Iowa has done some great work with cowpeas interseeded into corn, has had some really, really good success. Cowpeas are one that if this would have been in at V4, you'd have seen a tremendous amount of larger growth, because it would have really taken advantage of that extra week and a half to 2 weeks of heat and sunlight to really take off and get a good start. And I think one of these plots further down, we'll have some examples of cowpeas that are starting to vine their way up. I don't see it in this particular plot, but I know down the way we will be able to see that.
Keith, one thing to comment on with the sprayer blight was that the one thing that's not there is the presence of weeds.
Yeah.
The cover crop has suppressed all of our weeds, where we normally see pigweed or Palmer amaranth growing in there.
Yeah, that's right.
With the problems we have, you know, I think that's definitely something to note.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Something's going to grow there. So do you want to choose it, or are you just going to let nature choose it for you?
And that, going back to last harvest, that was pretty apparent with Noah's brother Anthony running a combine. He told us no matter what the stand of that cover crop was, wherever it was present, there wasn't weeds. So I guess people don't want to get the wrong idea that you're only going to get weed suppression where you have a large amount of emergence of cover crops. Even at small ones, that's possible.
Yeah. And it'll be exciting to have that GoPro in the combine this year, so we can kind of see some of that firsthand too.
Maybe I'll get a shot of that when you're talking about it, so when you're saying it.
Yeah, that's fine.
I'll zoom up when you say it.
Our next one is the warm season diversity number 2. We have iron and clay cowpeas in this mixture. We have soybeans, crimson clover, annual ryegrass, nitro radish, buckwheat, and golden flax. So again, another warm season mix. Comparing the two, off the top of my head, I don't remember what the difference is, but there's different. I think the cowpeas was.
Those were red rippers.
Those are red rippers, and these were iron and clay. So.
And these are more of a forage soybean. So similar mixes, but I would say a lot different results. And again, we don't necessarily know why, but there's not near the stand that we have here that we saw down there. Even where the sprayer hadn't run over the corn, there's a far better stand. Now we see there is some of the radish out there. There's some ryegrass, but not much, not a lot. Out here in the mowed off area where we can see things a little bit more, you know, we do see some radishes and some ryegrass and some cowpeas and stuff. But I would say overall, you know, if the whole field looked like this, I would be kind of disappointed.
I would be too.
But you know, again, there's a lot of variability. There's a lot of questions we don't have answers for yet. That's why we do the trials and experiments and try to see and try to understand, I guess.
And I guess as we learn, we will go ahead and make that next year's plot go by the past history of what we're seeing, and over time we're hoping that we get this kind of narrowed down so there's not so many choices, but it's choices that we know that has good possibility of being successful.
That's right.
Fall grazing number 1. Red Ripper cowpeas, soybeans, annual ryegrass, and forage collards.
Okay, this mix was designed to try to get as much biomass growth so we could graze it in the fall. We're not worrying about it overwintering, so we went with the tetraploid ryegrass. It probably won't make it through the winter, but hopefully it'll give us more growth this fall. This one I think we've had some pretty good success with. Jay can come in, zoom in over here. We've got a really pretty good stand of collards all the way down through there. Nice representation of the ryegrass showing up here. There's some cowpeas coming up down there, but if you can look all the way down the row, there's a decent stand all the way through there. And then over here, this is really pretty interesting over here. We've got really a good growth of cowpeas right here. And this is what I wanted you to notice with these Red Ripper cowpeas. See how this cowpea is starting to vine right up this corn plant. And Red Rippers tend to be a very viney type cowpea, and they will just continue to climb like that. And my prediction is if this would have been planted at V4 instead of V8, that this cowpea would be vined all the way to the top of this plant, because that's what other people have seen. When you get them in a little bit earlier and they could take advantage of that sunlight, they'll grow very quickly. It is not going to be a harvest issue, even if they harvest this corn before it's frozen. Cowpeas will die with the first sniff of a frost, but even if they don't die, that vine will just blow apart. It's not going to be an impediment to harvest whatsoever, based on past experiences. What I think is going to happen here is there's a good enough stand of collards that as this corn dries down, and especially after harvest, collards are pretty cold hardy. I think we're going to see this mix just really explode and take off when it gets a little more sunlight, and we'll really do quite well. You can see out here in this mode strip how much growth we've got on some of these collards. I don't know if there was just a little bit more sunlight, but there's a lot of nice growth right in this area right here, with the cowpeas and the collards and the ryegrass all really well represented right there. And I think we'll see what's in here look a lot more like this when it gets a little bit more sunlight. Yep. How long ago did you mow this?
About a month ago this got mowed down.
So this has had, what survived the mowing has had 30 days of sunlight.
Yeah, roughly.
Yeah. So I mean that's nice. Yep.
Okay, the next one is a fall grazing number 2. We have winter peas in this mix at 15 pounds to the acre. Soybeans, annual ryegrass, Elbon rye, and rapeseed.
Okay, so what I'm observing here is that we've got a pretty decent stand of winter peas. You can see we've got good representation of the winter peas. They're really viney, they're really spindly because, of course, lack of sunlight. They're not going to be real thick and real robust, but my opinion is they've survived this far in the shade. They're going to be okay coming out to harvest time. These winter peas, they're going to grow just fine until you start dropping down. You know, they won't really die off until you get down into the low teens. So he's going to get a lot more growth on this. It'll be an excellent fall grazing. The soybeans are making a fair showing back here. Based on what I'm seeing here, I think I like the cowpeas better than the soybeans right now. I think they're just a little bit more aggressive early on. They probably tend to be a little vinier. We'll stretch for that sunlight a little bit more. But it's not looking too bad in here. Plus the other thing is, because most farmers have soybeans in their rotation, soybeans don't make nearly as good a cover crop as a different type of species. So we put them in here to see what they would do, because this is kind of an experiment. But in the scheme of things, if you got soybeans in your rotation, we would discourage you from having soybeans as part of the cover crop. But the winter peas are looking nice. We do see some of the Elbon rye is coming on and hanging in there, and if that can stick around, that'll really take off when the canopy opens back up. There's a little bit of rapeseed in there. I don't see the rapeseed in this plot looking nearly as good as the collards did in that plot down there.
And Keith, I guess the question that you might answer here, as senescence sets into this corn and we start drying down the leaves and stuff, can we expect more growth out of even like the winter peas and things like that? We should see an emergence as far as growth there after we get more sunlight. I absolutely think so, because again, the number one limiting factor, it's not water, it's not nitrogen, it's sunlight. And when you take that away, it's what we see out here where this has been mowed and the cover crops didn't get mowed off. These are all, 3 to 4 times as big because they've been getting sunlight for the last few weeks. There's a winter pea right there by your foot that's really large. And, it's just, when it gets the sunlight, I think it's going to take off. So the goal is just to get things to hang on until that sunlight comes. That's right. And that's basically the theory of this whole planting system. Spring graze. We have hairy vetch, red clover, annual ryegrass, and Elbon rye.
Okay, we're kind of working our way down into a little bit of a draw. It's kind of a little bit of a boggy area. There's some deeper sprayer tracks through here. So this area probably stayed quite a bit wetter, and I think it probably contributed to a little bit poorer stand than I would expect to see. because like the clover that looked pretty good up there, we don't see a lot of clover down here. Now there is some ryegrass, there is some hairy vetch kind of coming. It's pretty small, but that stuff's going to hang on and it's going to be okay. So we've got some stuff. There's a little bit of clover coming right there, but I think a big part of this was that this area was probably just a little wetter than what some of these plants would have liked, and we didn't get as good a stand as some of these same plants we've seen in other plots. And we'll see better representation of hairy vetch down at the end here, I think.
This mix, oats, rye, and turnips, have had some popularity up in this area, so we thought we would go ahead and look at that, see how successful that was going to be. Theory behind this is usually when you plant oats and rye together in a planting, the oats will outperform that rye early on. And then after the freeze and things like that, it'll die off and the rye should go ahead and take off. So that was basically the theory, and we wanted to put this in here because there are people in this area utilizing this mix. Turnips in this area have been huge for years, especially in the seed corn production areas. We're trying to work with them to diversify their cover crops more than just put turnips out there. So we're not only in commercial corn, but we're working in other areas also.
And we can see the things coming in here. We can see that the oats, this oats is probably 8 to 10 inches tall. It's got some decent growth to it. I'd like to see a little bit more of it in there, but what's there is doing pretty well. The cereal rye is quite a bit smaller, but you can see how wet this has been. Look at all the moss growing on the ground there. So I think that's inhibited. We got a decent stand of turnips right in through here, but they're very small, very spindly, of course, because of sunlight. But a lot of these cover crops really don't like wet feet. They like better drained soils, and so all the moss growing there tells me that this didn't have great drainage, at least in some part of the season here. Probably inhibited it some, but the oats is hanging in there and doing pretty good. And nothing is better than oats for fall grazing, like you said, Dean. It's a great crop. If we can get that to survive and kind of take off as it gets more sunlight, it'll make a nice grazing contribution.
That's right. And the last mix that we have in this plot is named the Penn State mix. Reason being, Penn State has done a lot of research with cover crops over the years. They've developed their own interseeder and things like that. So by reading literature and things like that, we know that they've been very successful with this mix. So we kind of threw this in here a couple years ago just to see how it would react here in Nebraska. And to be quite honest, it has done well every year that we've had this in our plot. So in this mix we have red clover, hairy vetch, and annual ryegrass.
Yeah, so come on down here. There's a really good representation right here of all three of those. It's really doing quite well. We've got great growth on the ryegrass. Again, you can see that kind of shiny, waxy leaf. That's very indicative of ryegrass. The red clover is doing exceptionally well, 5 to 6 inches tall here. And again, I think this is going to really take off. And then there's pretty nice hairy vetch growing down. It's a little bit lower than these other things. It'll tend to kind of vine around on the ground a little bit more. But even if you can look all the way down that row, there's just an excellent stand all the way down through there. Right. And so, I don't know exactly, if the field conditions were a little different, because all three of these species were also repeated in some of the previous mixes, but none of them look as good as they do right here. So again, it could be field conditions, it could be different, differing environmental type things, but very, very good stand. This is a, pretty reasonable mix to put together, and definitely, the Penn State guys really had something going there. Now, one of the reasons that Penn State has been one of the leaders in this research, and some of the guys up in Ontario, my opinion is the further north you go, the better this system works. Because as you move north, you have several things working in your advantage for this system. Number one, your summers are shorter. So in North Dakota and Minnesota and Pennsylvania, some of those areas, 85 to 95 day corn is full season corn. And Noah, is this 100?
This is 101 here.
101. So this is fairly short season, but a lot of corn that guys are growing in this area is going to be 112 to 115. So shorter season corns, shorter summers, they have longer days, so they'll get more hours of sunlight in the same day as you move north. Your summers are shorter, but your days are longer, and that helps. You don't get as hot in the summer, and that helps these cool season things to hang on as well. So all of those things, I think, go together to make this an easier thing to have success with as you move north. As you move south, it becomes more difficult, but as you move south, you have a longer growing season. So it's not quite as imperative that you get this stuff in early, because you do have some time. So here in Nebraska, Dean, we're kind of in the middle. We don't quite have as many advantages as the north. We don't have the heat that the south has all the time. So we're kind of in the middle. And I think that's why we see some success, and we see great success some years, and some years we don't. And we're just seeing a lot of variability. But my observations have been the further north I go and see people trying this, the better chance they have of having success. But the one thing that we do know, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit with equipment, the one thing that we've learned for sure is that if you're not putting the seed in the ground, you're really taking a chance of having failure. We just know that for sure, that getting seed in the ground with some sort of a disc implement or a seeder of some kind is guarantees a much greater chance of success than just broadcasting that seed on top of the ground. And we'll be looking at the Symes' seeder here in a little bit, and they'll share a little bit about how that works and why they went to that. Other closing comments?
I guess if I was going to sit back and categorize producers that want to utilize this planting system, I'd say majority of the guys that want to adopt that have been around cover crops in the past, and they realize that the time that stuff's out there is very, very important. I know we've done some research here in Nebraska, not necessarily in V6, but planting dates of cover crops. A 2-week period can make a huge difference in biomass above the ground, for example. So we've done a lot of that stuff. So these guys understand that if they can make this work, they're getting a jump on what's going to happen after harvest.
Yeah, we kind of have a saying that every day in August is worth 2 days in September, and every day in September is worth 2 days in October. So every day you can have something growing in August is literally like having 4 days in October for it to grow. And it's just all about growing degree days and heat units.
Right, and I mean, this plot, our intentions was to get this out, get it planted at the V4 stage, but Mother Nature didn't help us out any. But we're looking at probably at V8 here, so in that window was really shortened up, probably by at least 2 weeks, 3 weeks, something like that. So what we're seeing here, in my opinion, in some of these mixes, is pretty impressive, actually. Yeah. So that, there's so many things that we have to learn about cover crops. I mean, over time. I mean, and that's why we're doing this, is to try and narrow those species that have the most success at using this.
Yeah, that's right. And we'll continue to evaluate this. We'll have the video from the combine, and we may come out here after harvest even and shoot some more plot videos. So we appreciate you watching. We decided to do it this way instead of having an actual field day, because with an actual field day we may only get 40 or 50 people to come to look at this, but with the same amount of effort we can have this on the internet for hopefully hundreds and thousands of people to watch and learn from. So we will sign off for here, and we will get some more video of this plots later.